Why did Ripple just toss a ticking clock, a charging ball, and a Tokyo subway line into one cryptic clip? Brace yourself, because the answer could actually rewrite how money moves everywhere. So picture this. I'm half awake, slurping the last cold inch of my morning espresso, thumbing kind of through X like I do when I'm kind of procrastinating doing literally anything productive. And bam, Ripple's account drops a 9-second teaser that kind of feels like it was just ripped straight out of Christopher Nolan's cutting room floor. Now, there's the ticking, or the clock, the kind of ticking. There's a ball that kind of looks like it's about to gore the next poor bear who kind of crosses its path. And then there's a signpost pointing to three totally different directions. And Wall Street, Bond Street, and the kind of line in Tokyo. Now, underneath it all, of course, just two words. It's happening. Now, I don't know about you, but when a company with Ripple's kind of firepower throws the word happening around like confetti, I pay attention. And the XRP army, they instantly went DEFCON 1 meme mode. Now, my notifications, they exploded faster than you can say to the moon. Now, within minutes, everybody from armchair analysts to hardcore insiders was kind of playing 3D or 4D chess, trying to, decode what on earth Ripple was actually hinting at. Now, some guy even asked his AI assistant to dissect the color palette, of the teaser, convinced the shades of the blue next to the ball meant a Fed partnership. Now, internet kind of sleuths, man, they never miss a single pixel. But here is the fun part. This isn't just Ripple kind of flexing for engagement. The puzzle pieces actually do fit. So if you're willing to yank out the kind of magnifying glass and do a little digging, you'll see. So let's go ahead and dig. First stop, that Marinucci line shout out. Now, on the surface, that is just kind of one of Tokyo's busiest subway routes, but any kind of self-respecting XRP detective instantly thought SBI Holdings. Now, SBI's headquarters are basically kind of spitting distance from the Marinucci kind of line, and SBI, for anyone who kind of missed that episode, has been Ripple's kind of power partner in Asia since, forever. Now, they are they have already been kind of pushing XRP into cross-border remittances between Japan, Vietnam, and a bunch of other corridors where people are sick of paying Western Union $20 to move 50. So that's pretty cool. But then why mix that with Wall Street and Bond Street, right? Wall Street, that we're going to get is, big finance, billions sloshing around, suits, cigars, yada yada, right? Bond Street, though, is kind of the quieter superstar. That's kind of where the New York Stock Exchange actually sits. So it's the kind of belly of the beast for clearing and settlement of the US equities. And here's where our story gets interesting. Ripple has been quietly swallowing up the plumbing of post trades. Case in point with their purchase of Hidden Road. So if you've blinked, you've probably missed it. Ripple bought Hidden Road a couple of months back. Most people kind of shrugged, Hidden Road kind of sounds like a boutique kind of hiking trail in Vermont, but Hidden Road is actually a prime broker that cuts its teeth helping hedge funds and high-frequency traders in the FX world dodge slippage. And crucially, this spring, right before Ripple kind of inked the deal, Hidden Road got accepted into the Government Securities Division of the Fixed Income Clearing Corporation. So why does that matter? Well, it's because the GSD clears more than $11 trillion in US treasuries every single day. That's more zeros than I can count on my fingers, toes, and houseplants combined. So when Hidden Road slipped behind the velvet rope, they actually became one of the kind of anointed few who can net trades and run repo operations inside the FICC. Now that means that Ripple suddenly owns a wormhole straight into the heart of the US debt market. And if you're thinking, hold on, did Ripple originally want XRP to be the liquidity glue in global payments? And you're not wrong, right? But here is the plot twist. For this particular gig, they're not lending or leading with XRP at all. In fact, they're leading with RLUSD, their brand new shiny stablecoin. Now, I know stablecoins, they aren't exactly, air horn news anymore, but RLUSD isn't your garden variety bank-backed token. Ripple's stated goal, is to make RLUSD the default collateral for settling, the kind of gnarliest, time-sensitive bond trades on the planet. So instead of kind of waiting a full business day for cash and treasuries to meet, in a kind of stuffy kind of clearinghouse, participants could just ping the XRP ledger, drop RLUSD on one side and drop treasuries on the other, and poof, settlement finality in 4 seconds. The kicker here is that XRP doesn't disappear. It's the actual gasoline paying the fee every time that RLUSD changes hands. So inside crypto circles, this, at least that revolution, kind of landed like a dad joke at a funeral then, right? Some hardcore believers were expecting XRP itself to rocket into every clearing account on Wall Street. Ripple basically said, chill, we're giving the market what it actually wants, which is dollar dominance safety, with the ledger speed we're famous for. It's also kind of like realizing that your favorite rock band is playing an acoustic set. It's a different vibe, but it's very much the same talent. Meanwhile, of course, RLUSD has gone on a listing spree. That kind of would make even Dogecoin blush. Now, in just a kind of few days, it kind of popped up on Kraken, Gemini, Bitstamp, BitMEX, and this kind of got my eyeballs, even BitGet. Now, if you haven't already checked out BitGet yet, you're missing a trick, right? They're quietly becoming one of the biggest on-ramps for retail traders in Asia and parts of Europe. That kind of wider liquidity is a massive vote of confidence because exchanges don't add stablecoins lightly. Compliance teams have to kind of tear them apart molecule by molecule first. Oh, and speaking of exchanges, here's a quick side note. If you're hunting for a place that won't fleece you on fees and actually gives you some pretty decent UI candy, give Blowfin a whirl. There's a link in the description down below. I've started funneling in my kind of let's see what happens money there because the matching engine is pretty snappy. And honestly, the setup and startup vibe kind of reminds me of Binance, criteria back in 2017, back when CZ still had hair. Anyway, let's jump back to those hints then, because there's still this kind of ticking clock to decode, right? One thing that Ripple execs keep kind of hammering, when they kind of go on podcasts is time to settlement. Now, every second that you wait to know whether your $400 million treasury trade is actually final, there's another second of kind of counterparty risk, right? Banks hate risk and the way that I hate kind of pop-up ads on Google Chrome, for example. Now, the clock in the video is basically Ripple yelling, your legacy rails are slow, and we're about to upgrade you to fiber optics. And the ball? Well, that's a pretty obvious one. It's the classic symbol for a roaring market. But I actually think that Ripple's tossing a sly nod at liquidity providers, right? Bulls charge forward no matter what's in front of them, right? The message here is institutions, right? Stop tiptoeing, the liquidity is coming. You'll be able to charge ahead without the fear of stepping on regulatory landmines. And that kind of dovetails beautifully into another quote, or at least another kind of of quiet move, I should say, that Ripple's actually doing here, which is Ripple's custody ambitions. So earlier this year, while we were all kind of doom scrolling through AI hype, Ripple actually filed a trademark for Ripple Custody. And then they kind of rolled out an app on iOS and Android that looks like a two-factor authenticator that you've ever kind of used, except it's wired directly into institutional vaults. So picture an HSBC treasury manager, approving $1 billion tokenized bond transfer by tapping approve on a phone. Now, it turns the whole idea of crypto cold storage into something that your grandma could actually handle. And guess what? The US Treasury itself is scouting third-party custodians for a potential national Bitcoin reserve. Right, so you can see the anchorage of digital is kind of already on the kind of short list, right? Metaco, now under Ripple's wing, could slide right in too. So if you're kind of a conspiracy theorist, feel free to imagine Janet Yellen secretly kind of practicing a Ripple custody demo account. And I'm only really half joking here. So where does that all leave us then? Right? Well, if you kind of zoom out, you'll see three kind of clear pillars here: payments, custody, and stablecoins. Exactly the trio in the kind of XRP ledger was designed to supercharge. Right? Payments give the ledger throughput and fees. Custody gives institutions a safe way to hold assets without suffering a USB stick in a safe, or at least stuffing one in a safe and succumbing to potential threats. And the stablecoin, of course, gives everyone the dollar-flavored kind of lubricant that makes each gear spin smoothly. So it's kind of like Ripple's rewiring the circuitry kind of system of finance, vein by vein, without asking the heart to stop beating. Okay, so let me interpret my own geek out for a sec here, because none of this really matters if we can't discuss it in real time. So if you want to kind of hash this out beyond kind of YouTube's comment section that's filled with bots, as much as we are trying to combat that, they just keep coming, why don't you jump into our free Discord server that's linked in the description below. There's a whole channel dedicated to all of these kind of different things with breadcrumbs, and yes, the memes, they are also fire. All right, so let's get back to the storyline here, right? The teaser drops, right? The community kind of freaks out, and we start speculating, I should say, on launch dates, partnerships, and maybe even an IPO. And there's an elephant in the room, which is the SEC. Now, we can't pretend that we live in a world where Gary Gensler doesn't, wake up and think he's done a great job, right? Every single morning wondering, what token, he wants to kind of go after next. Now, of course, he wakes up to realize he's no longer the head of the SEC, and times are changing. Now, Ripple's still, of course, duking it out over some fine details with the SEC, and, more specifically, is XRP a security, which, of course, we already know it is not. Yet, in this teaser, there's a single mention, or at least there isn't a single mention, of XRP's legal status whatsoever. It's almost like Ripple is saying, fine, argue with us in court. We'll still ship the product while you file the paperwork. It kind of reminds me of when Apple ditched the kind of headphone jack, right? Everyone screamed, Apple said courage, right? And then the entire industry kind of quietly followed suit. Now, Ripple's basically removing the need for legacy custodians and the T+2, settlement the same way that Apple removed the AUX ports. Over time, you forget that they were ever plugged in at all. But let's not gloss over the tension, right? Some die-hard XRP holders, they feel snubbed, right? They were expecting XRP to be the front and center, flipping, Fed wire by breakfast. Instead, they get RLUSD, and XRP's just the gas token. Now, is that a demotion, or is that the Trojan horse that sneaks XRP further into the castle walls? Personally, I think it's the latter. If RLUSD becomes the default collateral for $11 trillion a day markets, well, guess who's paying micro fees on each transaction? That's XRP holders. So just picture a grain of sand on a beach. Now multiply that by every tide and every day forever, and those grains, well, they actually do add up. I also keep coming back to that SBI connection in Tokyo. right? You got the CEO, I'm going to merge with your name, I apologize, but Yoshitaka Kito, maybe, I apologize, is practically the kind of godfather, of integrating digital assets in Japanese banking. So if Ripple's next step, involves flipping the switch on outwards remittances across Asia, well, they're not going to do it, piecemeal. They'll announce it once they've got at least 3 corridors piped and ready. Now, the 𝗕𝗃𝗃 line, it could actually be the breadcrumb letting us know those pipes exist. Okay, so let me give you a quick anecdote, right? I chatted with a kind of mid-tier banker friend in Singapore last week. Off the record, he told me straight that the compliance team has started Ripple readiness drills. They literally run kind of tabletop scenarios. So, what happens if, settlement windows compress from, T+2 to T+0.003? How do you reconcile books? How do you staff trading desks? And banks, they don't waste man hours on hypothetical tech that might arrive someday. They test for real disruptions that they see barreling down the tunnel. So at this point, you might be asking, this is a pretty cool story, but what's the problem here? And well, the problem, it isn't technology, it's actually something totally different. It's the rails that we're using today that were laid before the Beatles even dropped their first album. Every institution is tied up with vendor contracts, legacy hardware, and human habits that resist change like cats resist bathtubs. Now, Ripple is effectively saying, fine, we'll shoulder the integration headaches. All you need to do is hook into our API. It's a kind of clever kind of sleight of hand, if you will. Make the new thing feel like the old thing, just faster, cheaper, and transparent enough to make auditing look like a TikTok scroll. Now, the climax, the kind of wow moment, right? Just imagine a mid-2026 scenario where RLUSD is clearing treasuries, SBI is running point in Asia, and Ripple custody is one of the treasury's kind of de facto vaults. Suddenly, the phrase "it's happening" won't be marketing fluff. It'll be the literal description of global money flows flicking over an internet kind of native highway. And by then, of course, retail holders of XRP could find themselves earning passive fee income just by hibernating in a Ledger Nano. That's not financial advice, of course, but it does sound a little bit nicer than my current savings account, which pays roughly 3 gummy bears a year. And notice how all of this emerged from a teaser in under 10 seconds. That's how confident Ripple is, right? They don't need a Super Bowl ad. They need a GIF and 2 words. So let's tie this up with a bow. Ripple's Easter egg stuffed video is not just hype. It's a roadmap hidden in plain sight. Wall Street, Marinucci, Bond Street, US bonds, Asian banking, equities clearance, right? Ticking clock. You've got settlement speed, charging ball, liquidity confidence, hidden road acquisition, and FICC membership. Backstage pass to the $11 trillion Treasury Club. RLUSD listing, that's the dollar collateral that everyone secretly wanted. And Ripple's custody, well, that's the key card to the vault. Even if kind of half of the, at least that kind of executes, the old guard's going to look up and realize that the rails beneath their feet have been quietly morphed into something digital, something instant, something immutable. And look, right, I'm not saying that you should sell your car and go all in on XRP. What I am saying is don't blink, because the last time that finance slept on a little innovation called mobile banking, it woke up to find half of its branches obsolete. History rarely gives you 2 warnings.